Ukraine and its allies are preparing for more talks here in Berlin aimed at securing a breakthrough to end the war with Russia. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is due to meet U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff as Washington presses for progress despite little movement so far. Meanwhile, Russia has intensified attacks on civilian areas and on Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
The constant hum of power generators on the streets of Odessa after Russian strikes took out residents' electricity supply. Authorities say Moscow attacked 5 regions the night before with some 450 drones and 30 missiles, targeting the country's energy and port infrastructure. At one point, the Interior Ministry said 1 million people were without power, with temperatures around freezing. Many were forced to queue for water. Also in the city of Mykolaiv, the public was left without electricity. But even sitting in the cold and dark, people refuse to feel powerless.
They want to break us, of course. But as you can see, we're not giving up. We will just wait and see what happens. We want the war to end, but not under the terms that have been proposed in the peace talks.
President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been pushing hard for better terms under Ukraine's revised version of the US peace proposal. On Saturday, Zelenskyy said he'll join talks with European and American officials in Berlin and confirmed he would personally meet with Donald Trump's envoys there.
We are now preparing for meetings with the American side and our European friends in the coming days. There will be many events in Berlin.
But there's little sign there might be a breakthrough soon. One of the main sticking points remains the future of Ukraine's eastern Donbass region, much of which is occupied by Russian forces. According to multiple reports, Trump administration officials have been looking at possible territorial concessions as part of a peace deal, an idea Kyiv has repeatedly rejected. Russia is also insisting on retaining control over the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, something Ukraine categorically opposes. Negotiations and diplomatic efforts have so far yielded few results. The latest attacks underscore the challenge ahead, pursuing diplomacy while the war rages on.
We can now get the view from Lviv in western Ukraine, where DW special correspondent Nimisha Jaiswal is standing by for us. Nimisha, good to see you. Clearly a lot of pressure on Ukrainian cities. How is Ukraine approaching these talks in Berlin?
Well, Tommy, last evening, President Zelenskyy spoke at length about these upcoming talks and sounded somewhat optimistic. He said the chance for peace in this moment is considerable. He seemed to focus on recovery and reconstruction. He said that will be under discussion in the talks, as well as security guarantees. Now, media reports are saying that Ukraine may just be on the path to getting what it wants from the US, at least, which is bilateral security guarantees that are legally binding and approved by Congress. Interestingly, in last night's daily address, Zelenskyy did not talk about territorial concessions, which is one of the main sticking points that has been coming up again and again. But he did say that Ukraine was negotiating from a position of strength because it is holding its positions on the front line. Zelenskyy himself showed up at one of these contested cities in Kupiansk earlier this week to make a speech from there. Now, this is a city that Russia claims to have taken already. And this is important in this moment because one of the reasons the US has been pushing territorial concessions is that it believes Moscow's claims that it can take the region, the contested region, from Ukraine in the next 6 months. And Ukrainians insist this is not true. We are holding that line.
Ukraine holding the line, but is it realistic that they can get more than that? For example, getting back what they've already lost to the Russians or even more?
Getting back what has been lost to the Russians is not really on the table at all. Instead, what seems to be under contest is the Donbass region. Now, Moscow claims the entirety of this region, made up of Donetsk and Luhansk. Ukraine still holds about 25% of Donetsk, but Russia wants Ukrainian troops to back out from there. We got a few more details from Zelenskyy earlier this week. He says that the US would like Ukraine to back out and make this a special economic zone, that Russia calls it a demilitarized zone. But Zelenskyy pointed out that many sticking points remains. Who will monitor this zone? Will Russia pull back an equal amount? And how will they make sure that they're not infiltrators in this zone? Now, all of this is, of course, still on the table, but Zelenskyy has not completely shut down any conversation around territorial concessions, because he has said that this is up to the people of Ukraine. They could hold an election or a referendum. Of course, this is impossible in war times, and he has asked for Western security guarantees to be able to hold such an election or referendum here. But it does seem unlikely to actually go through.
Nimisha, I guess we'll have to leave it there for now. Nimisha Jaiswal in Lviv, thank you for that update. And let's bring in Rachel Rizzo. She is a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation and joins us now from New Delhi. Good to have you with us, Rachel. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz suggested that Berlin could see a final discussion of this common peace proposal for Ukraine. How realistic do you think that assessment is?
Well, I think that there is still a lot of daylight between where Ukraine is, where Russia is, and some of the key sticking points, especially in terms of things like bilateral security guarantees, land in the eastern Donbass. These will set the stage not only for peace now, but for the future security of Ukraine and for Russia's future ability to potentially invade again. So while I appreciate that Friedrich Merz seems to have a good outlook on what might come in Berlin, I'm a little bit more skeptical when it comes to how close we are to a real any sort of agreement here.
And so if there's no significant breakthrough from Berlin, what kind of message or what kind of signal do you think that sends to Moscow?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of messages here. One is of the immense resolve of the Ukrainian people as they are being bombarded continuously by the Russians, especially their energy grid, as we head into a cold winter. But I also think at the same time, there's probably a sense of immense frustration for the Ukrainians at this point, and immense frustration with the U.S. administration in Washington as well. So while there might not be an outcome out of Berlin, I do think that we are going to see really increased pressure on behalf of Donald Trump and his administration, not as much on Russia, but probably on Ukraine to really push them into a place where they have no choice but to agree to a peace. Whether that peace is just, I think we have yet to see.
You talk about pressure, I guess that focus on speed from Washington. What does that mean for the Europeans and of course for Ukraine as well?
Well, I think what it means is that Europe also really needs to figure out what role is it going to continue to play here? Does it have the political will? Does it have the resolve to continue supporting Ukraine if there's no peace actually on the table? Does it have a strong enough defense industrial base where it can continue to send weapons, ammunition? Is it willing to put some political skin in the game and use those frozen Russian central bank assets to give Ukraine a loan to start reconstructing? These are all major questions that are on the table. And I think the Europeans are feeling some immense pressure at the moment because as of now, they really feel like they have been sidelined in these discussions. And in many ways they have. So it's time for them to step up to the plate as well to prove to Ukraine how they are still willing to support it.
I'm just wondering, in your point of view, what can Zelenskyy get from all of this without making painful concessions? Or what's the sort of best case realistic scenario for him?
Look, I mean, I think at this point we have to be honest about the fact that there are going to be some painful concessions. I don't think that there is a scenario that we can discuss here that ends up where Ukraine has bilateral security guarantees, it has a future in the EU, it has a future in NATO, it gets its territory back in Crimea, it gets its territory back in the eastern Donbass, it gets control over the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. None of these things are going to happen all together. Some might happen. There might be some bilateral security guarantee with the U.S. But I think in terms of territorial concessions, we have to be honest about the fact now that that is likely what we are looking at, as difficult and unjust as that might be. I think that's the conversation that needs to be had here.
And of course, these discussions have been going on for quite a while, discussions about a peace proposal. How is Moscow reading this?
Oh, I think Russia thinks that time is on its side. And I think in many ways it is. It continues to bomb Ukraine. It continues to bomb the energy grid. I think Ukraine's feeling much more pressure than Russia is. I don't think the Donald Trump administration has been willing to put the sort of economic, military, political pressure on Moscow that it has been willing to put on Zelenskyy and Ukraine. And because of that, thus far, Russia has been able to continue its military offensive. It's been able to continue to gain territory, albeit slowly. But I do think that Russia just is not feeling enough pain at the moment where it really feels the need to come to the table. It knows what it wants. Right. Vladimir Putin knows what he wants. And he's proven time and time again that he's willing to put everything on the table in order to get it. So if I was Vladimir Putin, I think I would be sitting in a pretty good spot right now, unfortunately.
Rachel Rizzo, thank you very much for your assessment.
Thanks.